Are we live? We're good?
We're good.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Aaron Four. I'm glad you're here with us tonight. We're going to have a great discussion. I start off every show kind of talking about the premise of the show, Everything Matters. And I grew up in a very spiritual home. My parents were pastors. And for me, everything was based around the spiritual. And that was good. I mean, prayer, reading the Bible, those types of things. As I got older, I started to realize there's more to life than just the spiritual. And especially as I became a pastor and doing different things, you start to realize there's the practical parts of life and the emotional parts of life. All these things were kind of playing together. And for me, my experience has been that it's not just the spiritual, but the practical and the emotional. And seeing how God weaves in and out of those different experiences, whether it's in art and music or in science or these different things, seeing God in that has been a really amazing experience for me. So I wanted to have a show where we can kind of dive into all those things. Everything matters and how they connect. So that's kind of the premise of the show. I'm glad you're here with us tonight. And I'm excited tonight to have our friend Kelly Jolet and our friend Jeff McNeil. And they're both doctors. I want to dive into scripture, but you are a pediatrician, right? And tell us, I'm going to ask both of you this because I think this is really fascinating. We talked about it a little before. Tell me how long it took you to become a doctor and the training that went into that, because I think we sometimes take this for granted, the process.
A pediatrician
Yes.
has 4 years of college, usually.
Yeah.
Graduate from college, then you go to medical school. Medical school is 4 years. And then there's 3 years of residency
Yeah.
for the pediatrician. Then
A
you get
lot
done.
of training to get into doing that, to do a lot of commitment to doing that. Jeff, we talked a little bit earlier, and cardiovascular surgeon. It sounds scary, like to no end. Tell me a little about the training that goes for you to do that.
So the beginning of it is the same as what Kelly described. 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school. And then the training has evolved a little bit now, but when I went through training, you had to do a general surgery residency, which is 5 years. I did a year of research as part of that, and then 2 more years of the cardiovascular training. So 8 years of residency type training.
Wow, that's amazing. Huge commitment for you guys to do that. Thank you for being here tonight and getting into this. I've often wanted to have a discussion with people who are doctors and have gone through, the science that you deal with on a daily basis and the training you've gone through is fascinating to me. And I've often wanted to have a conversation to talk about miracles, because it's something that, the Christian faith is so central to a lot of the scripture, Old and New, and we see this in many different ways. So there's a scripture that I think is interesting. There's lots of miracles in the Bible, but I want to use this as a little bit of a foundation for our conversation tonight, and we'll get into different things. But it's from John chapter 9, and in this scene you see Jesus basically seeing this man, and he spits on the ground and basically makes clay and says, go off and then wash this off and you're going to be able to have sight. I mean, to be blind and to have sight, that's a big deal, I think still, right?
Yep.
And those are the kinds of things that I think if you're outside the Christian faith, you didn't grow up with it maybe like I did, you go like, this is absolute craziness. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, like did that really happen?
Did that really happen? I mean, we can go through lots of different things, miracles-wise, but as doctors, as scientists, essentially, I'm really curious to see your thoughts and ideas about how you mix that with your faith and dealing with these things we see in the Bible about miracles. So first thing for both of you is, and for all of us to kind of set this foundation, is how do we define miracles? I mean, we use this thing sometimes that we'd say, oh, I was in this car accident and there's not a scratch, and it's a miracle, or it's a miracle that dummy kid turned out to be this way. That's been used on me many times. Like, wait, you're a pastor? It's kind of a miracle that happened. So, how would you guys define miracles? Like, is that?
Yeah, I think we use that term for a lot of different things, like you're talking about, that don't apply to this setting where something really kind of otherworldly kind of happens.
Right.
So one thing is, an event that you can't explain with, kind of the natural understanding of how things work.
Right, for sure.
Outside of our understanding.
Outside of our understanding, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's great. It's beyond our ability to comprehend. And so that doesn't mean it's not real. And I think that's where this faith, we were talking about this air gap where kind of grace or what I can't explain, but I
Right.
just have to, if I've been given the gift of faith, then I just have to suspend my need as a scientist to understand it
For sure.
and to move into that. But I also think that as a person who had fallen in love with anatomy and physiology and just the sculpture that is the human body and just biology in general, I think that we take for granted the miraculousness of the human body.
Yeah.
And even just at the cellular level, I just could just not get enough of that as a high school student, as a college student, just understanding the cell and how does the cell work. And my college roommate and I were just completely fascinated. In fact, she went on to do her doctoral work in how do cells stick together? How do we not fall apart?
Yeah.
I mean, there's these things that just are just miraculous. Truly, we can't completely comprehend them.
Yeah. Ty, you and I had talked about this, and you had a definition for you that I thought was really good the other day.
I did. It's like a softball theology answer.
Yeah, let me hear it.
Which for me, a miracle is, I think it's anything that unexpectedly draws me back to my Creator. Anything that draws me back to God.
Yeah, I like that.
That I didn't anticipate.
That you didn't anticipate. It's a little bit kind of what you're saying to that.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that, like it can't explain something, whether pull on the thing and all of a sudden they can see to cells and a thing. How does that work for you as essentially a scientist? Like, and is that a difficult thing to walk through? I can't explain this. I mean, are you drawn to try to figure out those things for both of you? Is that a difficult thing to kind of part together? Or is that easy?
I think for most of the stuff we deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's not the challenge. It's the truly extraordinary things that draw that conflict out. And when you talk about this, the whole thing of our understanding, clearly that's changed over time. I mean, if you compare 100 or 200 or 2,000 years ago, what we understand now compared to what we had as a scientific understanding is so different, and you can imagine how that's going to continue to change as we become more aware and understand all this stuff around the world that we may not even know what we don't know. And so how do you balance that with what you've been taught as the real facts, and they may not be.
So are you still finding things, as a doctor, as a scientist? I mean, you're doing the kind of surgery that I think most of us are really. By the way, for both of you, and just for everybody online, I should have started off with this, but thank you for what you do. I mean, the commitment of what you have to learn these things and to put the time in to care for people is just really, really amazing. And for anybody else online watching, if you're in the medical field, we really appreciate it. Probably now more than ever, right? COVID's brought that out in a lot of us, so thank you for what you're doing. But as you guys do what you do, is there things in this miracle definition that you go, I can't explain that. That doesn't fit into all of the study and the data that I've had for so long. I mean, imagine you're doing surgery on people in probably a fairly scary part of their life if they're coming to you, right?
Yeah, I mean it's you don't really lose the understanding of what's going on, but it becomes routine in your day-to-day activities, and it's not abnormal for you, but it's always abnormal for the patient to go through these things. And so that part of it, it kind of humbles you every now and then when you think about it that way. But the thing that I kind of take away from our day-to-day interactions is the opportunity that we have to kind of use our training and our knowledge to show people kind of what our beliefs are, what our faith is, and how we use that expertise to help people.
Right.
And one of the kind of the concepts in the scripture is they were asking Jesus, why does this man have this blindness? What did he do? What did his parents do?
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of tries to separate that maladies are not a result of something that people did.
Right.
But I think they do kind of give us the opportunity, like he says, to demonstrate God's healing powers, either through the training that we've had or the medicines or all of those things. Because we can't do these things without what God has provided for us.
For sure. And don't you think it's natural as humans to go, this thing is bad. Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Oh, it must be because his parents did something stupid or he said something wrong. I mean, we've moved away from that in our society in America, but that was common thought. And I can take you to some parts of the world, and you've been there too. It's both of you have. They're not too far away from saying that, right?
No.
So I mean, we've gone to places, right, where you bring antibiotics in, and you are the great healer, right? I mean, how in the world?
You don't even have to be antibiotics. It can be vitamins.
I was with you on a trip where it was like Tylenol was like a big deal to this village we boated out to. So that perspective, though, America to everywhere else, or I would say third world, do you both see more of a primitive kind of just raw human wrestling through these things are bad that going on with me and who's going to heal me? Because a lot of the miracles we see in, especially the New Testament, there's a lot of healing stuff going on. I mean, you can look in Mark 5 where Jesus heals a bunch of people pretty quickly. Oh yeah, their faith healed you. But there's a lot of this miracle stuff that's playing out with people in their health because it's so real and so personal.
Well, it's interesting. You think about how do we explain, how can I science into some of the miracles? And I found myself thinking, this is probably how this went down.
Are you going through and you're reading this going, this is this? Yeah,
the time
that's what I want to hear.
When Jesus was called, he was in the town where Peter lived, Bethesda. Wow.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, and he was on the way to the centurion's daughter.
That's Mark 5.
Who had died. I don't think she was dead.
Yeah.
I think she was close to dead, but I don't think she was dead. No, I can't. So that's on my science mind. I was like, that was probably just really horrendously bad, and it just all worked out.
Just passed out.
But then and then I feel really bad. Like, okay, Jesus could have. That's certainly within the realm of his possibility. But there are things that I can't science, like Lazarus.
Yeah.
Right. So Lazarus could have been also asleep, but he did not smell good when he came out. Right. So there was.
And the gospel writer was smart enough to put those details in for people like you.
He needed me to hear. Yeah. Oh, by the way, he did not smell good.
Right. And Luke adds that because he's a physician.
Right. So at that point, there's something like, I can kind of see how that. Well, that guy just had cataracts. We did. There's some sort of. But there are some things that are like, that's just God. God did that one, and that was beyond our humanity.
Is that a natural kind of journey to, I think, dealing with science and talking about miracles, especially the things that have been so widely accepted in Christianity, to start going through and evaluate those different things? Has that been a journey for both of you? I mean, extensive research and science that you're going through, and then you read these things over and over and over again. Is a lot of you going through and going, well, this person probably had this condition and this thing and this kind of, are you breaking it down that way?
Sometimes, I don't think they all had leprosy.
You don't?
A lot of them had psoriasis.
Okay.
And so but leprosy was this general term, So you can sort of, extrapolate what you know to scientifically.
This is what you're trained to do, right?
Sure.
I mean, you go into any situation, you
Yeah,
have to start
it's just
figuring
that
those
it's
things
just
out.
bad skin.
Yeah.
That's generally leprosy. It's just not necessarily a leprosy.
Wow, that's really, really tough for the dude who had psoriasis and he got
Yeah,
lumped with the
I
leper.
know.
right?
We got, like, y'all are all lumped together with the leper.
I feel really bad for that guy. How about you? Do you do that same kind of thing, or is this a Kelly thing?
A little bit. I think there are certain things about Christianity that you just have to have faith and accept.
Yeah.
And like these examples of Lazarus, and this guy who hadn't been able to see his whole life, and now he can see.
Right.
Those kind of incidents you can't really explain away
Right.
with science, and so that, along with some of the creation stuff, you can't grasp it and understand it in the same way that we try to do with science. You just have to have faith and believe that stuff.
Is that a tough journey for a scientist? I mean, I think we're kind of built that it is. I don't know if it is or not, because I'm not a scientist. I'm a pastor, so.
About some things.
Yeah.
There are, but it's kind of, to me, it's kind of like you get to a threshold that is beyond what we can understand
Right.
or explain with science,
Right.
and that's where it's easier to make that jump to faith.
Right. I grew up in the church, like I talked about. My parents were pastors, and I spent a lot of time growing up studying the Bible. I think I told our last show, maybe we talked about this. I did a 2-year Bible study from the time I was 13 to 15 on Revelation with like an elder in our church. I mean, these are the kind of things that I did, and then
much.
I know, but that's the environment that I grew up in. It was just like that was the expectation to that. So then I ended up going to Bible school and studying theology, and I thought I knew some stuff, and I probably came out there. But the more that I delved into the depths of theology, the more I felt like, oh my gosh, I really don't know like anything. I remember most moments feeling like I thought I had it figured out, and I was more in awe of God the more I got the depths of it. Is there a breaking point in that as a scientist where you hit that? For some reason Siri wants to talk to me. Where you same thing where you get in the depths of it, where you finally have to say like, wow, I'm overwhelmed by this, and there's something bigger than me at play in this. Is there an experience like that? Is that comparable at all?
Well, what I can kind of relay that's somewhat similar to that is not on the medical treatment
Yeah.
side of it, but when I've participated in some of the medical mission trips,
Yeah.
and the way things fall together and the things that you're able to do in a very resource limited environment.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you have to look at that from my perspective, and the way that things come together and the things that you're able to do. There's got to be some
Something else
greater
at
force
play.
that's helping us make that happen.
Do you have any experiences out there? Because I know you've gone to Nigeria and to Guatemala, and you do cardiovascular work there.
So
where you're training people.
in Nigeria,
Yeah.
I've been on 2 trips there where we did cardiac surgery, in a hospital there that functions on a normal basis, but doesn't do heart surgery. So they have surgeons there that are trained as cardiothoracic surgeons, but they really don't do any cardiac surgery. And then when I was in Guatemala, before that, I was doing more general surgery. It was even more remote than the situation in Nigeria, where we would take over a building that basically had electricity, and everything else you had to bring in.
So the resources weren't anywhere what you were used to.
No,
I mean, without being mean to anybody, I'm sure they were not
right.
to the standards you have here in Austin.
Yeah, it's very different. If you take the cardiac surgery in Nigeria example, there are a few hospitals that are doing cardiac surgery within Nigeria, but as a whole, it's a very small number of places and surgeons that can do that, particularly relative to the population in need.
Wow.
And, we saw very advanced disease processes that would have never gotten to that point here.
Right.
And so it's kind of pushes your abilities because it's not the usual things that we see. And then you don't have all the resources that we have here to be able to take care of them.
So have you seen some of this? I mean, you've traveled around El Salvador, other places where now you're doing medical things in places where you don't have the resources you normally do. Have you seen some things that would not fit into your logic of what science says should work or shouldn't work?
The kind of medical care that we're providing in El Salvador and where hopefully soon in Myanmar and what we've been exploring down in South America, for me as a general pediatrician, it's going to be pretty basic. But what I think the thing that feels miraculous is kind of what you were touching on, is who actually shows up and what the need is when you arrive.
Right.
And there just seems to be this orchestrated thing that happens. Just had a baby who had a fever that doesn't normally happen in this place, and I just knew what to do, and we were able to take care of that baby. I think that's just...
Tell me about that a little bit. Can you dig in that story a little bit more? Is that okay?
Sure. It was actually our first medical trip down.
Okay.
And there we were out at the island, which is this place where we have to take a boat to.
Yeah, we go to an island, and there's the boat ride's actually pretty cool. But this is a secluded...
And they can't get off the
people,
island without a boat, and the boat costs money, and so it's just a very isolated community. And pretty much every clinic that I've done on the island, I've had newborns brought to me because they haven't really had a full pediatric exam.
Right.
So that's cool to be able to kind of go through that pediatric exam and show moms, hey, this is what's normal, this looks great, you're doing a great job. That's just kind of the icing on the cake on my job.
Right.
But there just happened to be a baby who was a couple weeks old who had a fever. 3-week-old and a fever in Austin would be in a hospital with an IV and probably a spinal tap and antibiotics within an hour and a half. And I had to wait on the boat, and it was going to be a couple hours. But it just was really, really difficult to be kind of stuck in this situation, not sure what to do. But what happened is that just this orchestrated series of events. There's a guy, he's got a boat. We can make sure he takes her into the hospital and into the clinic, and she gets her needs met.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't been there, they would have just been on that island that night and see what happened.
Not
right?
good, right?
Yeah.
And you know that as a
Yeah.
pediatrician that
Yeah.
those are
And
chances
not everybody,
are going
but
this and
chances,
this.
this is not something that we would tolerate
Right.
in Austin.
Right. So for both of you, in those scenarios, when you're out, there's the resources you have in Austin, and then when you go out to these more third world areas, does it cause this need, I say, for miracles to like the necessity for it to increase because they don't have the resources? What else do they have? I mean, do you see that as being a realistic kind of part of your experience? Well, they don't have all the bells and whistles we have, so there's a sense that God has to intervene in some of these things for it to happen.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think there's from their perspective, the fact that we come and provide for what their needs are,
Yeah.
is a very different perspective than what we have here, and there's certainly a different level of gratuity from them to us.
Right.
My patients here are very appreciative of what we do.
I'm sure, yeah.
But it's different when they've been trying to find somebody to take care of them without any success, and then this team shows up that can provide what they're needing.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's hard to receive, that you would be the miracle. That feels heavy and unworthy.
A little bit weird, huh? Yeah. It's got to be.
It does, but the way I kind of look at it is, like I was saying before, it's like all of this stuff came together.
Timing.
And it wasn't me alone doing it, and it's kind of greater than all the people together.
Right.
You know, when you get a situation like that, even if you just kind of added up the individuals that were there, the impact is really so much bigger.
So this is for all of you, and that's an interesting thing. I'm part of what I've wondered through this conversation, even before this, is do humans, and I'll see what you think, Ty, too, do humans need miracles? Like, the moment we had posted, hey, we're going to talk about miracles, I had people like, hey, I had this and this and this and this, have like, we tagged into something that, is there part of the human experience that says, I need to have miracles, I want that, it's part of a human journey to some extent of like, the mystery of that even is important to the human experience, to the emotional side of what goes on. I don't know if you ever thought about it that way, but
I would guess, I mean, it's just hypothesis, right? But I would guess that miracles are almost like belief in God, which is hard to explain sometimes. It's that it's supernatural hope.
supernatural hope. I like that.
We're so stuck in our lives on this planet, and some people live really good lives, and a lot of people suffer a lot and have good pockets between suffering. And so things like miracles give us something uncanny and expected to hope for. I don't know. I genuinely don't.
Yeah, I mean, you deal with a lot of people who need some sort of hope, right? I mean, and maybe asking a little bit more of a deeper question, but in your experience, you end up seeing people who just need the belief, almost the belief in miracles as a part of their own emotional, quality of being able to have that to get through things.
I think when I've had to tell families that their child has cancer, and I can rest in the fact that this has got a favorable diagnosis and the risk factors are fairly low for this particular genotype, and the child's risk factors are good, but there's no promise that things are going to go well,
Right.
and there's no lack of hope there. As we put it this way, there's always some faith that gets hoped on, that gets people put faith in.
They're looking
the protocol.
for the miracle, right?
They put faith in their provider.
Yeah.
They put faith in the nurses that are caring for them. They put faith in the hospital systems that are going to keep their children safe from infection. So there's all of this hope that gets tangled up in there. So there's a matter of faith that I can't control this, and I have to let go and let the process do its thing.
Oh my gosh, Kelly, when I hear that, that must be just the emotional. I mean, I hear you say having to tell a family that would emotionally just wreck me, just even thinking about it. Just, you're right in the middle of something so heavy, so real. That's big.
Yeah, but it's I get to use what I was trained to do.
Totally.
And I love these kids.
Totally.
And I love their families. I get this cool job where I get to know them from the time they were born or really little. And then we get through, stages and colic and ear infections or whatever. And then every once in a while, we get a curveball. And they're still the same kid, the same family that I get to take care of. And to me, that's like the big honor, is just to follow it along. And every once in a while, those curveballs suck so bad.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
But again, in pediatrics, we also get mostly good outcomes too. So
Right. Yeah. Do you? I mean, both here in Austin and in other places, Jeff, do you feel this? So when I hear her say that, I know you're in the midst of these kinds of things too. There's a side where you're kind of playing pseudo healer, right? Science healer. And then there's the side of this emotional heaviness of that. I mean, I assume you've had to face that too.
Yeah, it's usually when there's a bad outcome.
Yeah.
And you have to go talk to the family about it. Usually, it's not so much with the patient in our situation, because if things have gone that bad, the patient's usually not aware of really what's going on anymore.
Right.
And so it's really the interaction with the family, and a lot of times it's recognizing and telling them that we've done everything that we can,
right,
and we're not going to be able to fix this situation.
Man, I appreciate you guys so much. When I hear you tell those stories, I think for me, the emotional weight, and I know that some of the pastors have been there with people when they're praying for the miracle, when they're in, I'm there with them in the waiting room, and they're asking me to pray, and I'm doing it. I'm going to, just it's amazing to me. I feel like the connection of God between all those things, in the depths of the pain of that, and even when things work and it goes well, there's such a range of emotions. But I feel God connected in all that, in the science of those things. I see how He works timing wise, and I'm overwhelmed by that. At the same time, there's a lot of emotions that goes on with me for those types of things. It's heavy. So, and I would kind of define a little bit. I appreciate you guys being honest and sharing about some of your experiences. And again, it just makes me have a lot of respect and thankfulness for medical professionals, for sure. Your wife's studying to be one of those ties, so she's getting into that too. But here's a question for you that I'm really interested in for all of you. Is there a place for miracles in what I would call postmodern America? I mean, how we've been defining it and talking about it, both the mysterious and even the stuff that can be explained, the science of it. Because certain parts of the world would consider you guys miracle workers. They would go, oh yeah, I've never seen that. You brought antibiotics in, like that's whatever, or recognize the fever. But in America, is there a place for miracles in our society, or have we reasoned that out?
Jumping off that real quick, earlier in the conversation, Paul Vibrock had offered up a definition of miracles that was simply, is a miracle just something where there's no other explanation? Which made me wonder, just like you're saying, in our world today where there's so much information, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, how do they exist?
Or
basically?
information overload, right?
Yeah.
So is there still a place for miracles?
Well, I think I like what she said about the thing you can't explain, but it also draws you to God. So that feels like it allows for reverence, and I cannot explain it. I can't understand it.
Right.
I can't scientifically comprehend it.
Right.
But I can still be in reverence and in awe of it, and say that brings me closer to the Creator.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting with my theology thing. There was more of a reverence and awe for what I was going through, and that's why I wondered, the deeper you get into this, then the more you understand and see does it have a greater awe and respect for God and all of that.
Yeah, when I was doing deliveries, I wasn't doing the deliveries. I was receiving the baby when the baby had been delivered. Spent a lot of time in C-section suites, receiving babies who were maybe having trouble or babies who were not having trouble. Every single one of those is a miracle. It's a miraculous event. Yeah. And I cannot recall a time that I didn't cry in that time. And so that reverence stayed pretty high. Sometimes I was really tired, so I cried less. But and I was wondering, from your perspective, I remember the first time I was a third or fourth year medical student, and I was in a cardiac surgery, and I literally saw the human heart beating for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
And there's just this little window, and I took my breath away.
Right.
And I could not, I was just not in my body at that moment. and everyone else around us was just doing their job. Is that hard for you to maintain that level of kind of awe and reverence?
No, I think from time to time you kind of think about it and reflect on what exactly it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You get caught up in the moment and the routine, and
I think you have to, right?
And the process. But then every now and then, it'll come to you, and where it really strikes home with me still is, so when we do a cardiac surgery, we alter the blood flow to the heart, and we give some medication that makes the heart stop beating. And then when you're done with the work that you have to do, you take the clamp off, and the normal blood flow goes back through the arteries to the heart, and the heart just starts beating again. It's not like we do anything to make that happen. It just does. And, a lot of times you don't really think about that. But when I find myself thinking about that is if I have a student observer in the room, or, a new nurse that hasn't been in there. And so then you're kind of explaining what you're doing, where if you don't have a person in a training role, you just do what you do, and you don't necessarily take the time to think about what's happening. And so that's where a lot of times you'll kind of recognize that, like, that's pretty cool that it just starts back up.
See, when I hear that, thanks for sharing that. When I hear you say that, one, I'm really thankful that you have the kind of focus that it's just what you do, because we want, that makes us feel better. That's really, really good.
He cannot be out of his body during that time.
But when I hear that, there's an incredible awe that comes over me about creation, about God, and about that. To me is a miracle. I mean, how we've been defining, talking about, like, you clamp this thing off, it's basically not work. It's like done, like dead, and you release it and it's going again. Like, it just hits me. You realize that so many people who would hear that, and it's what you do for a living, we're like, this is nuts, like that. But do we explain that away as just science? And have we lost the awe of a God that would create that and do that? I mean, I sometimes I worry we're missing that. I'm so thankful you sharing that story.
You certainly can,
right.
when you're just,
and you kind of have to do your job well
for a period of time.
Right? Yeah.
And you can explain it at a biophysical, biomechanical, electrical level. You can kind of explain it.
Right.
But there's this
it just happens.
Holy impulse.
The heart stops, and then you take the clamp off and it goes. That's crazy to me.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. I mean, for a dude who's spoken and played guitar for most of his life, that it just that freaks me out. But again, have we lost the ability to be in awe of those everyday miracles? Like when you were talking about delivering babies, my wife has birthed 4 children, and every single time I'm like, how can you go through this and not think that this is absolutely miraculous? And every single one of them have been different, and I'm worried that they're going to make. I mean, it's like the emotional roller coaster you go through in this process of having children. It's a miracle to me. I mean, I would look at you probably sitting in the hospital every day, like I get to go through miracles every day. Or maybe you don't define it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, there are.
You said you cried every time, so maybe you're still in touch with the emotions of it.
I think there was just a holiness of it, right?
Yeah.
There's a holiness of that moment of the mother meeting her daughter or her son for the first time. The miracle that what we were worried about didn't happen, or what we expected happened and we were able to deal with it, and reunite a child with its mom, whole and healthy. I mean, that's cool. That's a holy thing. So I think that there are physicians, and I'm sure they're all scientists, and they're many scientists on the internet who are atheist or agnostic or do not have faith. Okay, that's absolutely their deal. I do, and so there is a part of me that is happy and content to suspend my need to understand that.
Yeah.
And I take it back sometimes to creation, that miracle of creation. I am completely okay with a non-literal interpretation of, the 7 days. I feel much more content with a God who can have an impulse that's just like barely moving a finger and millions of years unfolds this thing that he had in mind the whole time. That feels much more miraculous to me than, well, I got up, I did some work, I went to bed. That feels miraculous to me that creation could have been
Right.
so complex.
Well, I think, for the whole of history, when we talk about science, theology, philosophy, all these kinds of things, for lots of generations, there was kind of equal parts in this, where postmodern America has become so heavy on science only. And almost like it is almost the conversation where this is what everything is, and then the theological and the philosophical and the emotional experience isn't play at that at all. It's like this is taking over the entire pie, as opposed to saying, well, science is a really important part of this, but there is some other things that are also at play in our human experience. And I don't know. That's kind of my thing about postmodern America. Have we grown the need for knowledge and science and understanding at its depth that we've now pushed out these other fairly important things to a human experience, like emotions and having faith in something, and even experiencing something mysterious. Like, I think that's a really good thing for a human to do. It's almost like we're so imbalanced on that we aren't experiencing those things anymore.
You mentioned, what does it look like 2,000 years ago? It would just not be understandable and not comprehensible. And when we finally got a telescope enough to point into space,
Right.
and find out, oh, it's even bigger than we thought.
Yeah.
Oh, look how many more,
Yeah. We can't
solar
find the
systems.
end of it,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So we're still just on that apparently, at least for our consciousness, an unending slope of knowledge. It's just,
Yeah, and the further
Not
out you
like the
go,
end.
talk about more and more miracles of like how in the world did this star that's this huge, bigger than anything I've ever seen, how did that happen? I mean, when you get out,
Yeah.
and then when you go in the depths of the cell stuff and see the depths of that you still can't explain some of it to the tiniest micro part of it. You go in and you go out and you're just like, there's still a lot of stuff there. Right?
You talked before about, do we need miracles?
Yes. Do we need them?
And I think those moments that make us have that awe,
Yeah.
that's some type of a miraculous event to you.
Yeah.
And it kind of affirms that there is something bigger than what we can comprehend. And so I think that's what a lot of times people use, that sense of a miracle as kind of evidence that there is something bigger from a divinity standpoint.
For sure. Yeah. Are we okay over there?
Kelly's mic is not liking us.
Kelly's mic's not liking you. She
Yeah,
gets a little
it's
closer.
so like,
You wanted to kind of share with me a little bit? I talk loud.
Well, I was going to swap it out there.
Okay, go ahead and swap it out. Because I think this is really good stuff, and I don't want to miss this. And we're live TV, so we can kind of do this whole thing. So Jeff, as they're switching the mic, and we can kind of wrestle with this, I love that, and I think, to me, there is a part of this. See, I think even science and us wanting to figure things out is part of the awe. Like when I hear what you said earlier today, it just blew me away. I mean, and I'm sure you got lots more of those kinds of stories and things in place, but I wonder if even what the journey you guys are on with science and leading those things and figuring those out in our society, if that's a part of the awe and the mystery of it, because essentially you're digging into, you keep digging, and I mean, we're doing it right now with COVID, right? Everybody's like trying to figure this whole thing out. And we all have some faith, whether you're a Christian or not, or religious or not, that someone's going to figure this thing out, right? I think there's a general sense that everybody wants that. But is there a part of the awe for you in science? Like, can science be a part of the awe and the mystery of that journey? Because it sounds like even though there's parts of you that has to be very focused and matter of fact about, there's still unknowns and places you have to go
Sure.
or want to go
Yeah.
as a human.
I mean, it's kind of like the cliche of kind of the more you know, the more you don't know.
Right.
Because you just kind of keep discovering things. And a lot of the things about scientific discovery is when you find some new discovery or the answer to an investigation, is it usually generates more questions than
Right.
than answers.
What is this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is
And
this?
so, I don't really foresee that we're ever going to be as humans really able to comprehend everything there is. I mean, it's so big, and like you said, the more you look inward at the molecular and
Right.
micro environment
Right.
versus looking out into the horizon.
You just said a very, doctor way of saying a very strong theological statement. Basically, it's it's like the old thing, can God build a rock that he can't lift type of stuff. Or it gets to the point of, if we figure out God, then there's really not a God type of thing. And so kind of the theological statement that my ilk would say is, every way we push, God's still gonna be bigger than that. And every time we do that, we see more miracles, we see these things, we have more awe. The more we press into that, the more bigger and even smaller in those little depths of these places it goes. I mean, that's part of the miracle thing. But I find in a lot of my conversations with people outside the church particularly, and I understand where they would go, there's almost a comfort in them trying to figure all these things out. It's almost okay, I got it all figured out. We don't need to, and I'm comfortable with the mystery. And maybe that's what I grew up with in the spiritual world, or what I grew up with, is I'm comfortable with mystery. But there's a lot of people who are not comfortable with the mystery.
I prefer the mystery.
You do.
Yeah.
Even basically being a doctor and a scientist, you still prefer the mystery.
In my faith, I prefer some mystery.
Okay.
I do. It's interesting what you said suggested a quote from our Pastor Bono.
Pastor Bono's
That,
you like that, don't you?
If you believe Jesus, who said who he was, Jesus wasn't just a good teacher. Jesus wasn't a great example. Jesus wasn't a good friend. He said he was God.
Right.
So you either believe all of that, or you believe that he was a nut.
Right. It's
He
the old
was
Josh
insane.
McNeil
Right,
stuff, yeah.
right, yeah. And so I just choose to believe that Jesus, if he created mud and he put it on his eyes, he could have created a miracle, and as is God divine, could have healed that man. I believe that that's possible, and I'm okay living in the mystery. I'm happy to live in the mystery. Does it make me curious about?
Does your scientific
was there
brain still?
something
Yeah.
really amazing in that mud?
Some
Is there
enzyme
something,
that
do
there's
we
got to
need to
be some
explore that?
some vitamin enzyme that
Right.
did this. Yeah.
But I would prefer, again, to have God be not put in a box. I don't want a God that I can put in a box and explain. I really don't.
Do you feel that too? Is that?
Yeah. What she made me think of, though, is on the other side of it is, what do you think about the people that are in search of miracles, or
there's the other thing,
or offering up miracles in exchange for whatever.
Common sense, maybe, right? We can say that, without being mean, right? So, I grew. This is kind of part of my experience too. My gram, rest her soul, was amazing. She was like a 4'11" Italian woman with heels on, right? And grew up Catholic, and then somehow someone led her to the evangelistic church and she became a Christian and this kind of thing. But it was very charismatic, and I love it. Love the charismatic side of things. Was taught by charismatic worship leaders, lots of really good stuff. But growing up with her was really interesting because my gram, we call her Gram, she would, we'd be going to the Tyler Mall in Riverside, and she'd be praying, and if we didn't get a good parking spot, then the devil was out to get us, right? And it was so supernatural. I would say it almost would border on, like, we're going to push against the common sense of science. You guys have probably seen that, where the snake charmer kind of side of it, where it's like, hey, we're just going to pray this out of them. And it's like, whoa, you're really missing this great resource that the Creator has given to you with science and with these guys. That there is that side of it too. Is that hard? That must be really hard for you.
It is, and I've had a few patients, over the years that you explain to them, what you think their treatment needs to be, and they're like, well, I just want to pray about it, and I think that's going to heal me.
Right.
And, then one patient in particular comes to mind that, then got discharged from the hospital, comes back with the same problem.
Right.
And it kind of, that interaction with her brought up, there's, I don't know where the story came from, but it's talking about how the person gets to the gates at St. Peter, and they look behind them about how there's one set of footprints or whatever, and that's where I was carrying you, and then there's also kind of like, how come you didn't save me when I needed you? And it's like, well, I sent the person in the boat to give you a ride. I sent the other person, and so it's kind of like, how do we discern what is being offered to us as that intervention from God versus going home and continuing to pray about it?
Well, this is what the side that I think the extremes of these things, the super skeptic of everything miraculous, I think points at this group of people and says, see? Like, I think it piles on their lack of embracing the awe and the mystery gets piled on because of those things. Yeah. I could be wrong. You guys online could write in and tell me what you think too, but the extremes for me never do very well. Yeah. I find a little bit more common sense in the middle of that whole thing. But I think what ends up with that, it ends up hurting, especially as a Christian, we get lumped in with that. And then it's like you can't have a thoughtful, intelligent conversation with someone about science because they're automatically thinking that you're just going to be snake charmer praying this stuff out. And, everybody has the right, I guess, to do what they want to do with their body to some degree. I'm sure you guys have to roll with that. Yeah. But that has consequences with us on a societal, religious, or, theological level. Especially as a pastor who ends up being, dealing with people on both sides of that in our world. But I think it does more harm to that and even the people around them. I'm, again, a kid who's talking about my Graham, who I love and will forever. But I was like, I remember as a kid thinking, like, dude, you crazy. Love you.
God's not interested in parking
but God
spaces.
does not care about our parking space at the Tyler Mall. But that would go into lots of other things. To the point, like, and Mike Graham told me this story many, many times, and this is probably, and maybe science can prove this or not, or whatever else, I don't know. But this is the way the story was told to me. So I have my grandfather, who apparently I looked like and talked like and had a lot of the same, heart and kind of talents and those things. Like, a lot of that was gone on, but I didn't know him very well. So my grandfather, when I was like 1, was diagnosed with cancer, and it was the type of cancer that they did surgery and took everything out of him that he needed to live, basically. And I've heard this story growing up. My grandfather apparently looked at the doctor who I know who this doctor is, and looked at him and said, "God's not done with me yet." And this is how I hear the story. My grandfather lived for 7 years, and now he completely changed his lifestyle, and people were coming to him, and his dietary lifestyle things, probably stuff that was actually, looking back now, even ahead of its time a little bit, that somehow he got into. But, the story goes, and my grandfather did these things, led a bunch of people to Christ, did all these things, helping people for 7 years. So that's some of the
Right.
mystery side that comes within my own family tree that I go, well, I don't know what to say about that, because he did. I mean, and I've heard it from my father, from my grandmother, like, this is what he did, and he lived for 7 years. So there's that mystery side of it that, I don't know if you guys look at that. And the doctor was like, don't know what to do with this, because we took all the stuff from him that he should be. They gave him like 3 months. He lived for 7 years. And maybe you guys have seen those things too. So that's the hard part. I mean, people can give you evidence, even if it is anecdotal, and their own thing, that if you have certain leanings, can lean you over the edge pretty hard to go, well, it happened with Grandpa, so it's going to happen with everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part to think about it too, especially people who have faith, or people who have a proponent towards more spiritual. I say hippie thing. My wife's a hippie, so I can call people a hippie, but more the even that side of the things where you end up being drawn to that. So I don't know. I mean, how do you guys end up explaining? Have you had those experiences with patients with things where like this shouldn't work, and it's working? And does that mess with you?
Yeah. It's usually it's kind of like after the fact. You know what I'm saying? Like you'll see somebody that survived something that they probably shouldn't have, or you would not expect them to have survived through what they did.
Right.
That's where I see it usually. It's it's less common, I think, and less recognized, like when you're going through it.
Right.
Because part of it is you haven't been alive for 7 years, for example.
Right.
It's like, you're still in that course of kind of what's expected. You haven't exceeded the kind of the expectation.
For sure. What do you think about that? Have you had any experiences like what I've had?
Loosely.
Loosely? Okay.
Loosely. But can I think of any off the top of my head? Not in this moment.
Well, when you hear that from me, from being a person, pastor's kid, church kid, the whole thing, is it easy for you to accept that, or do you go more towards the science side of like, there's got to be a reason for this?
So I think earlier Tina Briggs said something that I thought was interesting, because we've kind of talked around it a little bit.
Yeah.
She said miracles, we were talking earlier about the place of miracles in basically the age of information, 21st century.
Right.
And she said miracles tap us into our spiritual side, right? And I think part of what we've talked about a little bit, or talked around a little bit, is that phrase kind of goes both ways, where if we're tapped in spiritually, or tapped in or engaged and active in our faith, it seems to, especially in the conversation that we've had tonight, like it makes it a lot easier for us to acknowledge and see God at work and embrace things as divinely orchestrated, and we can call those miracles or other things. But it makes it easier for us to grab onto that. My brother, with his ride with leukemia, has a number of stories that his doctors would not readily call a miracle, but based on all of the information that we can see, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
And he's doing well.
I have a patient who I asked permission to talk about tonight.
Okay.
That is the clearest miracle that I personally have experienced, and it was
Yeah.
my patient. So, sweet little girl born, has a twist of her intestines right after she's born, and that's a catastrophic event. It's a bad thing. And so we whisk her off to the Children's Hospital, and she has a surgery to find out how bad is it. And it's bad. It's bad. It's catastrophic bad. There's basically no way she's going to live bad. And she's just perfect, and then she's not perfect. And so this happened about the same time that I'm trying to throw a birthday party for my younger two kids. And my family's like, what in the heck's wrong with you? I'm fine. I'm just sort of like walking through the birthday party, realizing my patient's, I don't know how that's going to happen. So she goes back for her surgery that day, her second look surgery, the day of the birthday party. And I get the phone call from the neonatologist, and I rush off to the bedroom, and everyone's partying. And she tells me, it's perfect, it's great, her bowel is pink, we have no idea how this happened, but the neonatologist is blown away, and the surgeon is blown away, and I am blown away. And I'm able to talk to her mom that afternoon to say, how you doing, and she's blown away.
Right.
And everyone is just like this miraculous event has happened, and she continues to be a miracle. She's fine.
Yeah.
She's in middle school.
Wow.
And it's just this awesome moment. Every once in a while, that God gives us this. I'm still in charge.
Yeah.
I'm still. Don't try to explain it all.
Do we need that as humans?
I need that. I think
Yeah.
it provides me with hope, and so I don't feel responsible for the outcome
Right.
as much as I'm responsible to do my part to attain a good outcome.
Do you think, and this is for all of you, do you think in society, and I've kind of gotten this with the modern question, have we just pushed that out of our lives now that we're not experiencing that? And if we have done that as a society, we've forsaken the mystery. I mean, there's a balance, like from the crazy side of it, but I feel like the balance has gone more towards science than it has to embracing the mystery, if you will. Like, do we need that as humans and even society to have that kind of awe and mystery? Because that, to me, when I hear that, it brings so much hope to me. I feel like when I hear you talk about that, when I hear you tell me some of your stories too, just there's hope that wells up inside me about creation and about humans and about the mystery, if you will. And I look at society and I feel like that's not prevalent and a part of it anymore. It's becoming less and less and less. And it's becoming more dark and dry to me in some ways because of that. That scares me, let me put it that way.
That maybe people are more easily dismissive of,
Totally.
It was a coincidence that no one else was hurt, right?
Right.
Not a miracle, it was a coincidence.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I think it's okay to lean into the mystery. I certainly do that in my daily job.
That's
And I
good to
prefer
hear.
it.
Yeah. What do you think? You feeling me on that?
Yeah, I am. I mean, that's our job, right?
Right.
Is to try and constantly redirect and push people back around towards what if maybe instead of coincidence or maybe something explainable, which it can certainly be those things. This is where I almost interjected earlier when you're talking about God doesn't care about your parking spots. Unless that's how he's reminding you to think of him in that
point.
moment,
Yeah.
right? Like, who cares? He
Yeah.
can use parking spots. Why not? And so that is kind of the hard work in it.
You're right. And it meant
Yeah.
something to my gram. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it
Now,
was a part of her connection with God. For me, I was like, you crazy.
it's really
But,
hard
you
for
know.
really hard for us because we try and, especially if we grab onto something. This is the great challenge of the church, but any kind of evangelism, whether it's theological or brand related or whatever.
Right.
Like when you love something, trying to convince someone else that you should love it as much as you do can become really prescriptive, and so it becomes like we got to pray for the parking spot, right?
Because
But that's not a
quantifiable,
connection that
right?
anyone
That's
else is gonna have.
quantifiable to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this with missions before. There's this you get so excited about this experience and this awe that you have doing something in another country and having that experience that you almost kind of verbally throw up on people when you come home to the point they're like, ah, and maybe that's part of what's going on with the mystery part. Which I think is very intriguing and attractive, hopefully, to other humans. That's part of the question for me. But maybe in our explanation of it as as Christians, as people of faith, we've kind of verbally thrown up on people to where they can't even, that we may have to take ownership of that a little bit as Christians sometimes. Maybe whether in this room or just as a whole is like, oh, maybe we haven't explained that very well. Maybe we haven't engaged with that. And out of our excitement and passion and trying to be somewhat prescriptive in that thing, maybe that's what's going on with some of that. So, but there's a breakdown for me lots of times of people who are spiritual and the ones who are not. And I put spiritual for those that, whether you're in Christian faith or you're just spiritual, like there's a side that's like into it. And I can have conversation with people, whether they're Christian or not, about the mystery and the spiritual side of it,
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other side of it that it wants to be explained away so easily and quickly that now there's a reason for all of this, And yes, but there's some mystery to it. I find it fascinating. There seems to be a line where there's people on both sides of that. And I wonder maybe we haven't communicated it very well, as people of faith. And you guys are scientists, so you could help us figure that out. But
I think culturally there's a lot of self-reliance and self-sufficiency that is kind of taught to us or pushed on us, and that makes it harder to accept things like miracles and other ways of turning over things to God that maybe we would do better if we did that instead of trying to control it ourselves and try to do everything on our own.
Well, I look at self-reliance as such a very strong cultural value in America, particularly, especially if you get outside of these borders. That is something and I'm an American, so I'm kind of proud of that, but it may get in the way. Do you think that gets in the way of us experiencing some of these mysteries?
I worry that it does, because you're not open to experiencing those things like you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Because we're more like, how do I fix it, or what can I do to make it better?
Yeah, for sure.
And we learned that in our Latin American missions. I've learned that in El Salvador, that they rely on faith.
Yeah.
In a way that I need to learn from. And the self-sufficiency, sometimes we get, frustrated. Well, why don't you just work harder or do this more?
Yeah.
And take both hands.
It's to pull yourself up bootstraps, American stuff that we
we
do,
realize
right?
we need to be, I have to learn that at some point I just need to just walk in faith and enjoy that mystery a little bit, and don't try so hard.
Yeah.
Don't try to make it turn out the way I want it to, but let God show up and work in that.
Yeah, I may have told it on this show before, because it's been a really important part of one of my experiences about faith and miracles. And miracles of all shapes and sizes. I was in a place in Mexico one time with missionaries and people, and we were all riding, like you do in Latin America, particularly. You put way too many people in a car, or whatever size it is, and that's how you. So there was probably more people than should have been in an Ford Expedition type of car, and we're out in nowhere, and car breaks down, and I'm like, okay, what are we doing? He's like, well, get out of the car. I'm like, okay. He's like, what are we doing next? Well, we're gonna lay hands and pray over the car. And I'm like, he's like, hey, dude, we don't have AAA. I mean, he was like, he knew where I was coming from. I knew he was coming. We don't have AAA. They ain't never coming to get us out here. So we're praying for the car or walking, Pray for the car. Things started up. Drove back, 2 hours into town. And the guy's like, I don't even got the car here, So, I mean, it's crazy. There is a part for me that we're so reliant on our own stuff, our own knowledge sometimes, especially in America, that we push this mysterious part of God out. And I think it's so wonderfully connecting for me to God and even attractive, but we don't see that part of it. So it's one of those experiences that I've had. Anyway, so were you gonna say something? I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, I have a tangential question for later when you need something.
Oh, give it to me now.
Okay. So Scott asked a question, but I think Frank had an interesting preface for it. So I'm going to
Yes.
start with Frank's preface.
Yeah.
He mentioned that earlier in July he was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he was kind of thinking about was it's really what's a challenge right now is that if you're in the hospital, you can't get any support from your friends or family. Or like
Yeah.
you rely 100% on the medical staff
Yeah.
to take care of you because no one's allowed in the hospital right now. So with that in mind, kind of with the COVID
Yeah.
set of circumstances in mind, Scott, and I'm just going to quote Scott directly because I'm going to mess this question up if I don't read it.
Right.
So he says, so our mutual friend Craig at Ascension talks about how physicians are in ministry, caring for the hurting physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Do you guys see that impact in your role? And then to incorporate Frank's comment, like
Yeah.
how does that look differently now
That's a
in
great
what
question.
we're currently experiencing than it did 5-6 months ago? Does that ministry look different, not just the job?
The ministry part of it is not a whole lot different for me in my role.
Right.
But the other hospital staff certainly have a different role now because the family can't be there,
Right.
or the amount of time that they're there is so much less than what we're used to. And so particularly the nurses and the nursing assistants that are having to kind of spend some of those end-of-life moments
Wow.
with patients, that's certainly a different role,
Yeah.
substituting for family in those situations.
I don't work in the hospital anymore.
Right.
And so I don't have to face those really, critical moments. But I do feel like there has been so much fear about this, especially when we knew very little. And certainly as families are trying to make decisions about school and does grandma come visit and what about this particular, my mother has leukemia. What are we going to do?
Right.
So I find myself doing a lot of pastoral care.
Yeah.
Kind of with a science twist to it.
Yeah.
Like this is what we know, and this is what we don't know.
Right.
And then basically kind of life coaching it into what is going to be the best for your family.
Wow.
And then affirming, when you make the decision, you've made the right decision for your family, and you're just going to go with that. I'm going to support you. But relieving fear when we can, because we can do a lot of that now. We
Right.
have information, and then just helping them navigate
Yeah.
what life is like right now,
Wow.
and then just dealing with the fears of parents whose children, all of my toddlers are terrified of other people right now. It's just social isolation and just navigating the problems that are going to continue to roll out from
Right.
this. So it does feel a little pastoral, I would say.
I see that for sure. I mean, the premise of the show is practical, emotional, spiritual. I mean, I think you guys are now all of those things when they come into your office, or your staff is at least dealing with all those elements of that. And yeah, I don't know if any of those guys expected that when they started medical school or started nursing school. This was what I was going to be doing, but that's what this has brought to us now. So
I think the good nurses did. And the nurses just are miraculous people to me, that they are just able to just wade in to whatever the mire is and just handle it and love people. That is just, it's a calling. Your wife's doing an amazing thing. It's just going to be an amazing career for her.
yeah, Ty's
Well,
wife
God
is
for it.
studying to be doing the nursing thing. Yeah. Well, I'm one of those guys that I have a hard time seeing blood. Like I run, like my wife has to take care of all that stuff. So when I hear you guys talk, when I think about what you're doing, all of it seems like a miracle to me. I mean, I just go, oh my gosh, this is just really, really, really amazing. And I appreciate Scott's question because I think it does, hopefully the people who are watching give weight to what our medical crew, what all of you guys are doing right now. And we do really, really appreciate it. So, well, I appreciate you guys coming and hanging and talking about the science of miracles and and the miracles of science. I should add that to that too, because
Yeah.
to me, you know, the more I learn from you guys and dig into this, you know, science is a miracle too. I mean, and it should be. It's a different way of looking at it, but it really impacts me that way. So, thanks for watching with us tonight, guys. Really enjoyed having you here. Tomorrow night, Carlton will have him sing. Do you know if he has anybody special hanging with him tomorrow?
No, it's not my head.
Okay, I'm
But
sure
probably. He always does.
He'll do a little clip. So be looking out for that. And we'd love to have you on Sunday mornings on Facebook and YouTube and the website. And bring your friends, invite some. I would encourage you, if you're watching this, invite friends to this, and subscribe to this, and do the same thing for our Sunday services. A great thing easy way to invite friends right now is to come to our Sunday service. We'd love to be a part of that. So thanks for hanging with us tonight. Thanks again for you guys and all the medical professionals. We just appreciate you so much. So thanks for being with us tonight, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Yeah.